You've
There.
got three Zoom windows.
Oh, well, that's a great way to start. Yes. Well, I have the main one that I'm looking at. I then have the Zoom pop up where it says, "Hey, do you want to join a meeting?" Sort of like the default window thing that pops up. And then I have the one over on that screen. So the one that you can see there is on screen one, and then I'm looking at screen three, and then camera's like just off of screen three. But yeah, I don't have all three windows up. I only have two windows up, and then I have Obsidian on screen two. Yeah. So
So what does that allow you to do? What opportunities for behavior does that give you?
Oh, look at you. Look at you being clever. Clever with affordances. Well, it means I can see you. I can see what Zoom thinks is going on because sometimes it thinks I'm talking when you're talking. So I just make sure I click on Zoom to give itself a little bit of a boost. And then Obsidian, obviously, just like my second brain, you know?
Of course, of course. I think one thing we can talk about, you've probably seen it. It was Francesco's thing on Notion and the future of Notion
Oh, the
and how
home thing, or
the home thing and how it he thinks to kill databases and I'm like,
uh,
interesting.
no, I haven't seen it. No, I haven't seen it because I have been entrenched in
Oh,
affordances.
entrenched. Wow. Okay.
Within affordances. So
Okay.
some context. I, inside of the Discord of the grappling server, I had an amazing discussion yesterday. I would call it a debate. You could call it an argument because we had differing opinions. And I love it when ecological psychologists have differing opinions. So there was a debate between myself and a lot of the others in there about affordances. And I don't want to sort of say which side of the debate I was on or which side they were on. I just want to ask you a couple of questions to see what your initial responses are. Feel free to spend some time thinking through it. So, affordances are opportunities for behavior, correct?
Yes.
Right. So, do we perceive affordances of others?
Ooh. We perceive, can we perceive the affordances of others? No. Immediate answer is no, with a caveat, because we are perceiving their perceptions through our perceptions, which is a great, beautiful phrasing. We can see opportunities for behavior that we can see for them to take the opportunities of behavior, but we can't they may not be able to see those opportunities. They may not be able to perceive those opportunities for behavior, those affordances. Is my
So,
immediate,
so
which
your
is not
initial
very well defined.
I guess so. Your initial answer would be no, but then through the explanation that you've just given would
Mm.
suggest yes, because we are perceiving opportunities for their behavior.
Yeah, we're perceiving opportunities for their behavior, but whether that matches what they perceive.
So we are perceiving opportunities for behavior, like their opportunities for behavior. So we are
I
perceiving.
suppose, yes, I guess we are.
So
Yeah.
what aren't we perceiving?
We're
Because
not
you
perceiving
because you
what
were saying we can't know whether they are or aren't going to do the thing.
we can't perceive what they would do,
So
I
what
suppose.
information could be missing in our perception of others' affordances?
Well, what they can perceive, their perceptions,
Hmm?
their own unique perceptions, like
Of what?
what constraints there are in their environment, for example. So what things are constraining them. So if they don't have expertise that we have, if we're talking from like a coach-coachee relationship, we have expertise. And so we see affordances that they cannot. And there goes my video doing that stupid thing again. So I can't stop. So that we cannot, can we perceive their constraints? Maybe.
But what are
Maybe.
constraints?
Well, they're just affordances too.
The constraints aren't affordances. Constraints are from, because we directly perceive constraints from
Oh, from what we
specifying
see.
information in the environment. If specifying information is lawfully structured, which we believe because we believe we perceive directly, then the
Mhm.
lawful structure should be able to give us specifying information, us being all of us, information about affordances. That's what direct perception is.
Yeah.
So we both must be able to perceive constraints because it's in the specifying information within the environment. So what is the difference between my perception and your perception, apart from the obvious answer where it's within the organism environment relationship? Yeah, what does that mean?
Hmm.
What is the actual difference?
It feels it's expertise, attunement to the
That's what
opportunity.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's attunement. It is very much whether you have that expertise to attune to what's going on in the environment. That that relationship, whether you can, yeah,
That's my interpretation.
which also links. I've been thinking about this a lot because one of the videos that I think I'm going to record first on the channel is going back over Julie and Jeff's conversations about neurodiversity because I found that really interesting and I had additional thoughts on that.
Mm.
Um, and one of the things that he said is around its difficulty in kind of attuning to the information in the environment. There is a difficulty there that is an ecological perspective on neurodiversity, and it's kind of that sums it up.
That's what learning and expertise is. It's the ability to attune to specifying information we directly perceive.
Yeah.
So I guess disclaimer, if you couldn't figure it out already, I think we can perceive affordances of others, and in the
Mm.
Discord they were saying no, we can't. And I
I see
understand.
why. I see why, but equally, maybe we can perceive it, but it's the attunement part. That's probably what they're trying to say.
I think an assumption they are making. This is what I was working through today with someone over WhatsApp. Hello, Alex, if you're listening. So, I was working this through, and I think potentially. So this is me thinking about what they might be thinking about opportunities for behavior. Makes sense. Um, is that they are assuming when I say we perceive affordances of others, we are perceiving the same affordances, which I don't think is accurate
No.
because each individual will have a unique perspective of affordances because they are organism environment specific. It's the relationship specific. So the attunement of specifying information will be unique to each individual. However, affordances are opportunities for behavior, which are lawfully structured within specifying information in the environment. Therefore, I must be able to perceive affordances, opportunities for behavior of others, and not just of other people, but of other animals. When I
Mm.
look at a bird, there is an opportunity for them to behave in certain ways, i.e., fly. When you look at birds with wings, they have an opportunity to fly. Does it mean that organism has the action capabilities to fly? That I don't know, but throughout experience and learned expertise, attunement at specifying information, etc., etc. That's what learning is over time because we're in a current future. Then I can actually answer that because affordances is over time, it's not a snapshot. So I can
Yeah.
look at a bird in a picture and go, because if I'm saying this is the first time I've ever seen any animal that ever looks like that, and it's a like literally just been born, only just seen bird thing, I may look at it and go, I don't know that it can fly, as it were. But if I've seen any animal fly before, i.e., any flying object, then I have information, specifying information that I've directly perceived about the affordances of flying, the behavior of flying. So when I look at an animal with action capabilities, I could perceive the affordance to fly. When you look at, is it the ostrich that's a bird that can't fly? You'd look at that and think, oh yeah, that could probably fly, until you learn that it can't.
Mm.
But you still perceive the affordances of flying to that bird, but the action capabilities don't allow it.
Yeah.
Which, so I would say we perceive affordances of others, which brings me to my second question, which, because we've had this discussion, I think predisposes some of the potential answers. When we perceive affordances, do we perceive opportunity behavior we cannot do?
Yes.
Okay, why?
Well, well,
Why, yes?
because it is lawful information. It's there. It is there. Just because it is there does not mean we can act. It is an opportunity that is there. Whether we can do anything with it is almost it depends on whether we have attunement to that information, whether we have skills and expertise and we have learnt how to use that information.
So, going a little bit further then, because you and I seem to be thinking in the same way. Um, does an affordance exist if you
Does an affordance exist if you haven't perceived it? Probably. Yeah, I would just. Well, yes.
That would be my answer. That would be my logical
Yeah.
answer. Why? Why do you say that? I know why I say that. I'll
But
share mine after.
why I would say it would still be there?
Why do you think affordances exist even if we as an organism haven't perceived them?
Because affordances are they're not necessarily dependent on us.
I'm so glad you said that.
Like affordance, they are there. Things are there. Like I see a pen and I may think, oh, I'm going to write some notes down about X. My other half might see a pen and they'll start drawing a picture. Same thing. But yeah, so yes,
And that's the way I'm thinking as well,
that's
because
quite exciting actually.
I know.
All of the things we can't, all the affordances we do not see, that's more exciting than the stuff we do see.
Like this is where I start thinking about, okay, like objects have material properties, and those
Mm,
material properties are specifying information in the environment which we attune to in order to act and behave. But the material properties don't go away when we move. Like just because I've moved out of my room doesn't mean the opportunities for behavior in my room go. It just means that I am not directly perceiving them at that moment in time, but perception isn't a snapshot in time. It's everlasting, it's consistent. So affordances don't disappear, but the opportunities for behavior in that moment in time would obviously not be available to you. But I don't
mm,
think an affordance not being available doesn't mean it doesn't exist,
yeah.
because we perceive affordances that are not doable. Like if I'm a child, I can't climb up a big stair. That doesn't mean it's not an opportunity for behavior. It means that there are action capabilities I currently don't have that would allow me to
Mm,
do it, i.e., I'm not tall enough. Extending that out to all of the other impractical affordances, I, as a human, can't fly. Correct. However, if I combine my organism with other objects, now I have an affordance, like an object being a phone, an object being a pen. That's an action capability that's given, like I'm afforded that activity because of the object. Well, now if I get into a plane, the affordance of flying becomes doable because I've
mm,
added things to my action capabilities list. Action capabilities, I don't think is the fully encompassing term there. But if I'm adding something to me as the organism, so the functional system rather than me as the organism, then my opportunities for behavior, i.e., affordances which I perceive, flying, become achievable. Just because an affordance isn't achievable doesn't mean it doesn't exist and doesn't mean it's not an affordance. I still think it's an affordance. That's the way I'm thinking about it.
yeah, that's
And
cool.
and to me, that's really exciting. And
Yeah.
I understand the arguments against, but I think they're built on assumptions that aren't like they don't align with ecological psychology, like
Mm.
truly align with ecological psychology. Maybe I'm just a radical Gibsonian, but
Radical Gibsonian. I like that.
yeah, maybe I'm a radical Gibsonian, and I'm not sort of like in the in the fluffy ecological psychology. But yeah, and it was
I actually probably think something that I keep noticing with what we do, we are incredibly practical with how we discuss a fluffy philosophy
mm,
because that's kind of I think it's where we both came from. If you look at the productivity space, the organizational space, and all of that stuff, you're very much tactical. What can I do with this?
yeah,
And
I'm
so it's
just
probably
uh,
taking the ecological approach and bringing it into action, and the focus being on action.
Now, I don't like doing the whole call out thing, and like saying, "Oh, you're wrong, you're bad." But I think having healthy discussions is useful. And this comment got 3 hearts in Discord, and there weren't many people following our conversation. Um, but they said, so obviously this is huge conversation, so bear in mind this is somewhat taken out of context, but this is the conversation that we're talking about. The final comment, I left the conversation at this point because I felt like it was getting a little too emotional for my liking, and the discussion had sort of petered. But they said, so it's not true you perceive affordances for others. That's IP dictator talk. IP being information processing. Now, obviously, we've just discussed that we believe that we do perceive affordances for others, and we believe that we perceive affordances that aren't achievable or doable at that point in time. So the first part of that claim, I don't think we agree with, but that's IP dictator talk is interesting because I think that exposes something else within this discussion that I personally don't like. I see you're browsing around.
I'm trying to find it.
All right. Yeah, it's in the general channel. It's a few scrolls up. But yeah, and the reason I think this is interesting is when you think dictator talk, I don't think of information processing because you can have an ecological approach
Yeah,
but be a dictator.
yeah, absolutely.
So saying that's IP dictator talk brings in the us versus them. And I don't think it's an us versus them because yes,
I
they
mean, it
are.
can be. I mean, it can be, but that's not, that's adding another layer on top. That's adding a constraint on top of that and an assumption that is,
I think that adds a social construction to the environment that we're working in. And adding social constructions like that into an open discussion debate, whatever you want to call it, to me is restrictive of open conversation. I mean, as soon as I saw that's IP dictator talk, I saw an us versus them, and I didn't perceive the conversation, perceive being maybe a choice word there, but I didn't perceive the conversation as an us versus them. It was a working through thinking. Like, this is what I'm thinking, that's what you'd be thinking. But as soon as I saw that, I interpreted, if you want to say, them as saying, you are different from me, you are dictating, or you are trying to dictate, or that would be a dictating way of thinking, which I don't think is accurate. And the conversation, looking back at it from that lens, rereading the comments, I can see an alternative sort of like tone in the way that they were speaking or the way that they were writing. And this actually comes back to the article that I wrote, that I published yesterday about reading. Reading isn't just like recognizing words and bringing comprehension to it. It's understanding the perspective and the tone of the author. And I think there are different tones given with words, which is obviously difficult to understand with text. But looking at that, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on IP dictator talk, from the discussion between information processing and ecological dynamics.
I think it's very much it's a society thing. This person has been hurt by a coach who is,
You
there are
found
so
it.
many assumptions that's been made about you and about the conversation that is like, oh, no, which is quite interesting.
I, I'm not. I'm not saying, just to be clear, I'm not saying the assumptions people make about others is bad because humans,
No,
we work on heuristics. That's how
yes.
human functions. We need to work with heuristics to be able to function. Otherwise, we would be overthinking literally everything. However, as conversations move forwards in time, I think we should challenge the heuristics we initially go in with, i.e., the assumptions we initially go in the conversation with. And that's how I approach conversation. I approach conversation not at a blank slate, but I assume the best out of everyone involved in the conversation, even
Mm,
when they say something that I perceive as potentially attacking or derogatory or something like that, when it comes to the tone or the perspective that they're using, maybe the words that they're using. For those that have seen my comments on YouTube, some people attack me or could be perceived as attacking me inside of the comments for being bad, not doing this, not doing that, not understanding or being insensitive. But when I respond as like as well as I could, as optimistic or as idealistic as possible, because that's the way I choose to interpret information when people are communicating. And I haven't had a response from one of my responses where the initial person went something like, sorry, that came over more than intended, or that's not what I intended. And that is where I could have, if I followed my internal heuristics and assumptions, attacked them
yeah,
because I perceived something they didn't intend because of whatever tone I read out of it. And that to me is where the person reading my words is reading an intention from my words that I didn't have. And to bring that all in circle, I think that is them perceiving affordances of behavior for me. I think they're perceiving
yeah,
other affordances, but
yeah.
because our attunement to the specifying information, in this case, the words on the screen, is different, I am
Mm.
acting differently to the way that they would expect me to act. So that's how I would explain the situation, but they don't think that's accurate, which is fine. That's up to them. I realize I said a lot of words there, but
Yeah, it's interesting. People are fun. We are fun.
yes. So to this note, actually, do you want to talk about the notion thing, or do you want to move over towards the cognitive load theory thing that I alluded to a second ago? The cognitive load theory, being
Let
overhyped. Do you want to do the notion bit?
That is fun. We can do a notion thing. A notion thing's fun. Let me just get up the stuff so I have it because it was a passing comment and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I'm
Did you
like,
find the conversation Discord? I assume you did with
I did,
one of
yes. Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
Uh,
People listening probably won't be able to find it because it will be in like a week or 2 weeks' time, and that will be like miles back in the thread. But if people are interested to see the full context of the conversation, let me know inside of the comment section of the YouTube video so I can just tell you where it is, or I can send you a DM and link you to the message. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, so basically, this is an article that, or an opinion piece that Francesco wrote around the future of Notion. And there were a number of kind of points he made around Notion AI isn't ready. I mean, yeah.
I don't think any AI is.
No. Why Notion should kill databases. And I'm like,
Huh?
"Right." And the next Notion products, chat and whiteboards. So a number of interesting ideas, and a lot of the Notion community popped in and started kind of talking about that.
Right.
And one thing I find quite interesting
Is this a
is
post on Twitter or Tool Finder
yes, so
or
there was a post on Twitter as well as an article. It basically Francesco described what the role of Notion Calendar, what SCIF means, why Notion should kill databases, which I'm just like, no. If you want to kill databases, use another tool that it it's basically my kind of what I got from the whole thing was we should turn Notion into what other apps that aren't Notion are. Notion's databases are a kind of fundamental core feature of Notion.
Mhm.
They are uh, they are a specific thing that they have done. It's an opportunity. Like those databases are just one of the opportunities for behavior of organizing that information in a specific way, in a very organized and structured way, whilst also having the blocks and the other pieces. And still, I think many people don't use databases.
I I've just found the article. I have actually I skim read this article because not gonna lie, I read the top, and I didn't like it because immediately when I see Notion Calendar, I don't see Notion Calendar as any good. I it's
No, no,
I
I don't understand
so
anything about Notion Calendar and why it's any good. I mean, I downloaded it, I tried it out, and I'm just looking at it going, yeah, but Morgan, yeah, but Morgan,
yeah.
yeah, but Morgan, yeah, but Morgan.
I guess to add a caveat here, obviously, I can see the post was brought to you by Akiflow, and there was a conversation recently on YouTube. I say a conversation. There was a video on YouTube recently with an Obsidian user moving from Obsidian to Notion because they didn't like having to bring their tasks into their calendar manually. And so they went to Notion so they could bring their tasks from Notion into Akiflow, which makes sense. They want their tasks put in their daily journal to go to their calendar. Morgan are currently working on an Obsidian integration for that to work, but I put my tasks in my calendar rather than a daily journal. But I can understand that workflow. However, when I'm looking at Notion Calendar doesn't do anything Google Calendar can't already do apart from the Notion integration bit, which is so restrictive. So that's why I didn't read much further. When I see the rest in peace databases, why Notion should kill them, I'm they shouldn't kill databases because data
No, it does not make sense to kill databases. It just,
because
no.
that is what Notion do. And I think this, sorry, Francesco, if you're listening, I doubt it because we're like half an hour into a video, into a podcast that probably isn't your sort of thing. But I think this is Francesco's misunderstanding, potentially ignorance. I know that has a negative connotation to it, but I think there's an ignorance there of how code software works. Like, databases in Obsidian is just a page or a file with metadata, property metadata that can be manipulated and therefore shown in a query result. A database in Notion is just a query result of pages showing the metadata information. So getting rid of databases is saying get rid of the queries of pages. But that's dumb because that's literally what every app wants to do. Like
Mm,
Obsidian has the data view plugin, data view community plugin, which people have built and is the most popular plugin in Obsidian because people want to query their pages. In
mm.
all of the other note-taking apps, again, you want to query or search for those pages with metadata. And Notion databases is the querying. You get rid of the databases, you get rid of the querying, which seems silly.
Yeah, and I like because uh type one error or Ben mentioned and made a reply around this about why Notion should kill databases. And their reply was this completely misunderstands what Notion is. He talks about it as a block-based design of Notion. And yeah, it would be very nice to have some of the databasey features on a block basis. But then at the same time, that removes a constraint and it doesn't feel like that's the direction Notion is going in. It feels like they're going in, let's constrain it more because you've now got the home release. You've now got a task database which has to have XYZ properties. Now, most of them will have XYZ properties, and
To me, that's just a template. That's adding in ease of use for onboarding people and adding in constraints. So the beginners, yes, it simplifies the environment for learning. I understand that, but it doesn't afford because it's constraining. It doesn't afford all the opportunities. Whereas those that are familiar with Notion and are useful and good and understand the opportunities, they will see that as constraining, which is limiting, which obviously they don't want to have. Because
because that's the thing. The reason why I liked Notion was because of the opportunity for flexibility. If I wanted a dashboard like that, I would go to an app that is focused on that. I would go to ClickUp. I would go to Asana. I would go to, I don't know, throwing it out there, Morgan.
yeah, I,
Because if I
this,
want something, and that's why I moved away from Notion, because
mm.
I didn't want all of the additional complexity that I used to desire. I just wanted to be able to put things in and make it as quick and easy as possible for me, and I could do that.
And I think this relates to a conversation I was having with Capano, the CEO of Obsidian, about VC backing. Notion have VC backing. Notion are supported with lots of money by other people, but other people obviously want the money, and the other people are going to look at businesses and people that have the money, which don't have the time to sit there and fiddle around with databases and properties and the rest of it. They just want to go in, get done, and go out, which means they want as many constraints as possible with the flexibility to do what they want. But that's restricting other users, which is why I left Notion years ago, because they were focused on enterprise, on teams, on people that have, for better or worse, extremely constrained workflows,
Yeah.
which I don't want. I want to be able to adjust mine, which is where a lot of the feature requests that I asked for 3, 4 years ago still don't exist because the people using the tool don't need it. They don't need the flexibility. And when talking about blocks very quickly, if they are going to go block focused, well, now you're looking at the dubbed PKM tools and things like AnyType and Logseek. We have block IDs, but block IDs, one, are extremely challenging to get your head around if you're not familiar with the code and the back end of how it works. And two, add so much flexibility to the way you can organize information that you would need to constrain it, which is what they're already doing. So what they would do in
Yeah.
future, if they do block-based focus, is to add page-based focus because it's easier to organize, which means they would go backwards to go forwards again, which doesn't make any logical
And
sense.
I think that's what Notion fans like n people with expertise in Notion would want
Mhm.
is because that's why I stepped away from Notion. I still build Notion systems because for many people it's great, but now it's becoming more, it's not even typical because what is that? It's just it's being constrained more and more, which is great because people can see the affordances of the tool, but it's bad because the affordances that are also there, people could just look at the home screen and I create a dashboard. Okay, cool. I'll just put it all in one. Be great to have everyone using an all-in-one task database versus a like 8 or 9 different task databases, but then that probably will actually lead people to actually have multiple task databases again, which I still don't like and it makes me sad.
Mm. I mean, the thing for me is the notion, like the experts, as it were, the people with expertise in Notion will want things that the novices don't. Now, I mean,
Mm.
I could link this to the cognitive load theory right now, because it's the expertise reversal effect. It's it's the amount of information, or as John Sweller would say, element interactivity. It's the amount of information one person can deal with. Those with expertise can manage more information, more element in interactivity. They can deal with wider variability because of their expertise in organizing the information. And when you add lots of opportunities, lots of information, lots of affordances, it makes the environment, obviously organism environment relationship, complex and therefore difficult for novices to manage. Um, and when I'm looking at this chat and whiteboard, that's another feature, which means if it's another
Yeah.
feature, it's another affordance. If you're adding features, you're adding affordances, you're adding complexity and bulk, making the onboarding process harder. So to me, Francesco's point 3 goes against Francesco's point 2,
Yeah.
which leading back to my video where I discussed Francesco and his task and calendar app, like going backwards and forwards, I think to me, this is where their assumptions and their fundamental assumptions of how we learn, this is educational science, this isn't philosophy or tech, this is educational science. His philosophy, and not just his, but many other people's philosophy, is built on simplicity. We don't want to overload ourselves in working memory. We don't want to burn out because of cognitive overload. We don't want to do any of those sorts of things, and we are hardwired, and we need to store things in our memory to be able to remember how to do things, or we need something to store it for us, i.e., a second brain. Which all of those assumptions, for me anyway, lead to suggestions like this, where it's a lack of understanding of the opportunities for behavior in the environment because you have constrained yourself so much. It's like looking at something, it's like looking at a table and saying, okay, that's a table, I put stuff on it. Well, yeah, but it's also a base where you can hide under it and you can put a blanket over the top. But he doesn't see that because it's just a table to him. That's what he has stored in his memory. It's a table. That's it. But it's not. It's loads of other things.
Yeah. I think that's something that I've been speaking to a couple of clients recently. One who's just joined on recently after they made a post around talking about how they've got lots going on, loads of stuff going on, and so many like people have a lot of things going on, and
If they didn't, I'd be worried.
exactly, but everyone is telling them to do less. And it's like, yeah, sure, okay, cool. I just won't feed my kids today. I just like won't do, I won't have a shower today, or I won't do this, or I won't do that. Like, yeah, sure, okay, cool. I'll just stop doing things because obviously that's the only way. It's not. That's the point. And I think
Yeah.
that's the frustrating part when because we have this like cognitive load, just reduce the load, just lower it down, just make it smaller and smaller and break it down into manageable pieces. And it's like, mm, but then there's more pieces. And then if you're assuming cognitive load, then that means there's more pieces. And because there's more pieces, it's more complicated, which means because it's more complicated, that means you can't do it because you filled your brain up, and then you're screwed because you filled your brain up, and then you're useless, and then you're hopeless.
Well, you see, we have a capacity, a working memory processing capacity of 3 to 4 things. So we're good for 3 to 4 things. But we've got a working memory store capacity of 7 to 8 things. So we can store some things in working memory whilst we're processing it, but we can't have too many things, obviously, in working memory. So we can just transfer it to long-term memory where it's stored forever and we never forget things. Like, I know we're taking the mick here, but the theories to me
It's
just
just
don't
so
make
bloody
sense.
complicated.
It's,
It's just so convoluted, and if you actually just yeah,
but 3 months ago, that's what you would
I
have said.
know, I know. I was looking back over a course that I wrote to do with taking and completing courses, and I'm like, oh, I hate like no, no,
You are
get
well in
in
the
the
matrix now.
get in the bin, get in the bin. And I'm like, I might have to completely remake that course just because of that one assumption.
That's the thing. And this is the thing that really gets to me. These fundamental assumptions people use. It's not oh, it's just a thing over there. No, it completely reshapes the way that you act in the world. And
Mm,
acting in the world, i.e., behaving in the world, is everything that you do. It encompasses who you are. So
yeah.
that, oh yeah, that's just a small assumption over there. Indirect perception is a small assumption. Yeah, but it
Mm-mm.
actually branches out into literally who you are and how you act in the world. It's not this small little thing. No, it's huge. So you could completely upend all of the work that you do if you change that assumption, which is why it's so scary to adopt the ecological approach, because it's not just oh, I'll spend a couple of days reading about it and I'll just go. No, no, it throws your world upside down, shakes it around, and then you start building it somewhere completely else. So, um, this, because we've sort of alluded to it already, this idea about cognitive load theory being overhyped. This was a working title, or this is a working title for an article I want to write. And I figured I'd get your initial interpretations of what that may be. What do you think I'm gonna say? What do you think the point is?
The point of the article or
Oh yeah,
the
yeah. Yeah, what do you think my points are gonna be? What do you think I'm going to discuss?
Well,
If you were to read if you were to read that title, if you were to read that title in an
okay, if I was
article,
just to read that title and I was not,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So if imagine you are someone, well, you're yourself just before this conversation, and you read a title that says "Why Cognitive Load Theory is Overhyped." What do you expect to be in that article? Do you think it's going to be long, short? Like, what are your expectations of it?
I don't really have any expectations when I read stuff these days.
Okay,
But
yes, you
that is
do.
these days, to be fair. So
Yes, you
I
do.
kind of like keep going with it. It's
Everyone has expectations.
it's probably just gonna recycle the same old tut. But that's still me now.
Yeah, yeah, but would it though? Because ah, this is why I'm intrigued because most of the articles I see about cognitive load theory are either explaining it, explaining what it is, or explaining
Mm,
how to use it.
mm.
I did a very quick Bing search yesterday about cognitive load theory, and I was trying to find an article of its critiques. And I found in an article explaining what it is, one small subheading of three bullet point things of critiques, but the rest of the article was all about what it is. There's extraneous load, there's intrinsic load, you want to avoid cognitive overload. It doesn't, most articles from what I've seen don't mention element interactivity, which is literally the entire theory, which is a little bit confusing to me. It seems like they've taken the buzzwords and they explain the buzzwords, but not what the thing actually is. But yeah, how do you think it would change? How do you think it would differ? Because obviously, when 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 I see the myth about something, I'm like, oh, there's going to be debunking here.
Yeah,
When I
yeah.
see overhyped, I don't know. I don't know what I would expect to see
I don't think I know either. I don't know,
because
is the
cognitive load
answer.
theory can't be disproven.
No.
You can't disprove it. It's an improvable theory, as one of the critiques in academia would suggest. You can't disprove it because you can't measure anything. So it can't be wrong. So it can't be debunked. It's not a myth because you can't prove it. You can't prove it or not prove it. It's a theory.
I would be tempted to put is cognitive load theory a myth? Like, if I was to, given my expertise of what I know what you're going to talk about, because a myth would draw my attention in, like previous me who didn't know anything, because you're asking a really intriguing question.
Mhm.
And you could very quickly go, no, but it's also because the assumption is that cognitive load theory is fact.
Yes, which is not because it says theory in the name, but
Yeah, I know. But that is the assumption is that cognitive load theory, working memory, all of that stuff is a fact. After discussing it with people, I've been having these conversations a lot recently because,
this is how the brain works.
yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but what if it isn't? This is just a theory. Wait, what? It's just a theory. It's not fact. It's not a fact. We have just taken it as a fact.
Because so many people
It's
have said
not.
it.
It's not a fact. It's a theory. It's an idea. What if it's not true? What then? And that's the bit that kind of it's terrifying. Like
Hmm.
it's actually quite scary that so many people believe cognitive load theory and the whole information processing is a fact.
What's even more scary for me, which I think is quite telling of the information era that we're in right now, is when you look at the dates of cognitive load theory, the main article people reference is from 2011. 2000 and that's not in that like that's not in the 90s. That's what, 13 years ago? 13 years, and it is everywhere online from where you can see anything to do with education, learning, even outside in other spheres. They use mental effort and cognitive load, and I'm cognitively overloaded, and people are burnt out because of the cognitive load that they're under. Like, it's just becoming part of language, much like the way information processing approaches has become part of language. And that to me is scary because that's 2011. What if what if it was in the 90s? 1990 something. I mean, I know there's research papers before that, but it didn't really become popular until around the early 2000s. And it pushed itself when Sweller did his paper and then presented it at the conference, research at a conference in 2000. I don't remember when. I think he did the conference before the paper, maybe. I can't remember. It's not something I really pay too much attention to, but it's like the early 2000s that this thing has grown, become big, but now it's almost everywhere. It's everywhere you look. But it's a theory, and people assume it's a fact because so many people have said it. Where are the
Yeah.
people challenging it? And that's what I want to do. I'm like, are we sure about this? Are we sure this is accurate?
Yeah, because that is the when I have conversations with people, it's like, oh well, there's just too much. I just need to get rid of it. I'm like, why? What can you actually do that? Like, you tell me right now, you have 80 million things going on, as you say. Which ones are you gonna get rid of? Well, I can't. Okay, so what are you gonna do? I'm gonna remain overwhelmed. I'm like, doesn't that suck? Like, doesn't that just suck? Like, you are basically telling yourself you cannot do what you want to do based on a theoretical thing.
So, question for you:
Yeah,
cognitive load theory.
yeah.
How do you think we would explain that through ecological psychology? How do you think we would explain cognitive load theory through ecological psychology? Because cognitive load theory, yes, is built on working memory, but how would you explain the experiences that they have tested and proven? Because they use experiments to test and prove the effects and the principles that is in within cognitive load theory. I don't know how familiar you are with the assessment systems.
I'm not very familiar because every time I look at it, I want to scream at them. So it just makes me angry. So if you could fill me in, give me the bits in the middle if you have them available to you now, and
Well,
I'm happy to kind of.
okay, well, the easiest ones to like what everyone would assume is when you're in an environment, if you add something and
Yeah.
it's too much, you become cognitively overloaded, right? And there are loads of effects, them testing different parts of that, whether that's multiple pieces of information, whether that it's just visual audio, modality effects, or whether it's splitting attention, looking at two different things, the split attention effect. Right? When you add more things, element interactivity, whether that is intrinsic or extrinsic, or it's not even that, it's intrinsic or extraneous because it's not
Okay.
extrinsic, but same difference.
So would it be related to expertise in attuning to to the affordances in the environment? Basically, how good are you? What is your ability to constrain the environment that you're in? How well can you constrain your environment? And the less expertise you have, the more information is available to you, meaning you are constantly kind of perceiving, well, you are always constantly perceiving.
I can see it. Like you're almost at where I want. It's not where I want you to be. It's where I'm at, and I'm like you're almost. You followed the same way of thinking I have.
Yeah, so
Uh,
it's something to do with the kind of like I remember the thing that Julie said
the
about
blanket and
the
pulling them.
sheet and pulling down the attractors.
Hmm.
Would it be in tuning to the attractors in the environment? But I'm trying to not say that.
But that's what we
But
would
that is
say in
what
the
it is.
ecological approach. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Attuning to the
element
attractors in the environment.
interactivity is a cognitive load theory term.
Mhm.
Ecologically speaking, what would we call element interactivity?
Direct perception,
Which is
which is an
would do
opportunity
we
to
would
behave.
we use would we use in direct perception?
What are we using? Affordances.
Which are given to us by. There's
Parents.
another there's another bit in there. What are we actually perceiving? We are in arrays of what?
Light.
Which is
An environment.
no light's in an environment.
Yes.
Yeah, but what is light?
Information.
There we go.
Oh, yeah.
Specifying information.
Yeah.
Element interactivity is the specifying information. That's the way I would see it.
Yeah.
Can you see the connections?
Yeah.
Because if there's specifying information in the environment, we perceive the affordances directly, and expertise allows us to attune to specifying information that we want to use through our action capabilities, which is
Yeah.
everything that we spoke about at the start of this.
Yeah.
And as I've mentioned, as we perceive affordances that we can't yet do, then there's action capabilities. There are things that we can't do. That is element interactivity. If there are lots of things that we perceive that we can't do, well, now we are cognitively overloaded, or you're unsure about what decision to make.
Yeah.
But you can still make a decision. You can still do something.
Yeah. And it's about that choice to action. When you take that action, you perceive what you can do next. And when you perceive what you can do next, you take another action. And then you basically spiral into a loop of being able to
What
do
you
things.
experience.
Yeah. And you literally just can keep going.
And that happens because we are goal-directed individuals. We behave because of goal-directed behaviors, right? And
Yeah.
if we change our goal, then our behavior changes. And the behavior will change because of the affordances we perceive in the environment, and goal direction comes from the affordances we perceive. For if we're in an environment where the element interactivity, using cognitive load term there, if the element interactivity or specifying information affords us, i.e., we perceive the affordances of something that we can't do, well, we're not going to do it. So the goal
Mm.
wouldn't be to do it. The goal would be something else, which means in cognitive load theory, if they say, oh, we're actually overloaded, we can't do that. No, we would explain that as actually the specifying information, we can't attune to the specifying information, so we're going to do something else. So we choose
Yeah.
to do something else, not because we can't do that, but because we don't have the information, we haven't specified the information to be able to do that because we haven't learned to do that yet. So it's not we can't do that, it's we haven't learned to do that. We don't have the expertise to do that. And that reshaping for me is huge.
Yeah. And that's it. If we think about it, let's go one layer above. If the goal, because often, because I'm doing sales pages and all that lovely stuff, where we're discussing like this coaching that I'm going to be offering or I'm offering, is all about basically taking all of this and putting it into business so that you actually get things done. So you actually do things. But often when you speak to people, they're like, I need to like reduce the load and simplify and this. So all they are their goal directed behavior is to simplify and streamline. Except the assumption that's been made there is that it's actually possible to do that.
What I feel might be useful here is if goal, the goal direct behavior is to simplify something, that is a different goal from doing the thing. Like when you're doing the thing, it's different from organizing things to help you do the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if I am turning pages in a book because I want to turn pages in a book, that is different from me reading the
Really.
book.
Yeah.
Like
And the thing is that that's what I find
the
really
different
interesting
behaviors.
because when you see that from a business perspective, everyone's like, I need to organize myself, I need to get myself organized. So the thing they want to do is to organize things, not do things. But really what they want to do is do things. So go do things.
Exactly.
Go.
You
Just
don't
that
like
way.
we're all talking with arms. Wait.
Way.
And this is something that I said it in a previous video. I don't remember which one it was, but I said we're not organized. We don't become organized. We don't get organized. We are organizing. It's dynamic. It's consistent. So when people
Mhm.
say I want to be organized, they are organized, but
Yeah.
they want to be organized differently
Yeah.
because of the environment they're in, the relationship with the environment that they're in. So the organization will change because we are self-organizing systems. Then we need to organize, but that obviously takes energy. And to me, that the energy is cognitive load. Because
I do not.
if you're cognitively overloaded,
Mhm.
you don't have the something, you don't have the mental capacity, the limits, you don't have the something to be able to
Oh.
organize the element
Oh, so
interactivity.
it's just energy.
That's what I see it. I see cognitive load as just energy. Like
Yeah.
because you can't measure energy.
No.
You can't measure cognitive load. You can measure
No.
proxies for it, but what are the proxies that you're measuring? The proxies at the moment, if you're unfamiliar for measuring cognitive load theory, is mental efficiency. So it takes your perception of how much effort you put into something, and you take the performance and you calculate how efficient it was. I.e., I think I put lots of effort into this thing, but I performed really badly by whatever metric that's being used. Therefore, I have low mental efficiency. Or on the other side of that, I put like no mental effort in this, but I was really good at this. That's high mental efficiency. That is the proxy that's been used for cognitive load, but it's not directly measuring cognitive load, and effort also doesn't directly measure with performance. But in ecological psychology, the way we would explain that is, well, if you are perceiving like you're putting less effort in, well, doesn't that mean you have more expertise?
Yeah.
If you
So
perceive
why
you're
is it
putting
hard?
more
Why
effort
is it? Why
in,
are you making it hard? Why do you want to make it hard? Why can't it be easy?
so gain expertise. What does gaining expertise mean? Learn. What does learning mean? Attuning to specifying information in the environment that is more useful to you in that situation. What is that? Self-organization. So you self-organize yourself, learn in those environments to help you through it.
And
If you
then
go,
you've got all the tips and the things and the actions that you can take to assist you with that. And
but
that's when you
that's what you
actually
would
use
do.
them.
But you don't need to
Yeah,
be told to do that.
yeah. You can
Well,
just do it and it just happens. I had a client recently who was like, I need to do this and you need to do that. And I think, go do it then. Okay, what do you need? Oh, but there's like 80 million other things. Okay, cool. Well, what do you want? Like, where do you want to? I want to be able to make more money. Okay, cool. Let's go do that. Let's launch a product. And it was really interesting because there was a lot of resistance at the beginning, but as they just kept thinking about that and what they wanted to do and what they were excited about, it's like, oh, I need to do all of the, oh, I forgot about all of these things. I'm like, okay, cool. Do you want to do those things right now? No.
that, I mean, that relates to the intention, mindfulness, whatever word you want to put there, views is, oh, we need to be intentional with our actions. Well, we are. We are intentional. We are goal directed. What the issue is the goal that you're selecting to be intentional about. When people say, I want to be intentional, you are intentional. What you actually mean, I
Can't not
think,
be.
yeah, what I think you mean is you want to be intentional, but towards different goals. Because if you want to be intentional, all you need to do is behave. Like you don't do something unless you intend to do it. Can you do something by accident? Yes, but the behavior is still something that you did. You intended to behave in that way, unless you're not in control of your actions. And if you're not in control of your actions, well, one, are you really an organism? Because self-organization. And two, if you're not in control of your actions, then how can you intentionally shift your goals? Because you can't control your actions.
It's funny. It reminds me of a conversation I keep having with my son right now, who is gaining expertise in this quickly. It's really fun. It's like the way he is, the behavior he is exhibiting is not conducive to what he wants to achieve, and also is not what he's just being very unkind to everyone around him. And so I'm like, I'm sorry, this you can't do that. You cannot treat everyone else in this way. It
Is
is
that what you're
not
saying?
to certain degrees, yes. I am paraphrasing the exact words I'm using.
Okay. I'm just saying because saying can't is a solid, harsh word.
That's true. And basically, well, I didn't want to, but that's what you're doing. Yeah, but I didn't say that I wanted to do that. I'm like, okay, cool. But what you're doing isn't matching what you want.
If we go back to affordances of others,
Yeah,
he, as a child, perceives affordances of others, but he isn't attuned to the specifying information as well as others.
yeah,
So he is acting in a way where he perceives affordances for others, but because he
mm,
doesn't understand whether that's social expectations or physical limitations of individuals, that you don't do that. So his intention of behavior is accurate from his experience in the world.
yeah,
And that's where the environment that he's in, i.e., you, anyone else there, would, in theory, act in a different way to way that he would expect because of whatever reason. So it's not a, you can't do that because he can do that. It is an affordance.
yeah.
He can do that, which is where the child question is, well, why not? And
It's
the
funny because
adult,
actually, when I'm looking at how it, okay, you can do that. That's fine. But if you do this is the thing. These are other things that will happen. Oh, why do you always say that? Because it's true.
Yeah, but those things might happen, but they might not happen. And that's the
Yeah.
thing that I think that when it comes to like teaching children, children see everything because they're
Uh,
not as constrained because they are still learning. They don't have
yeah.
these social constraints and all the other experiences that we have put on perceiving others' affordances. And so when you look at a child and they say, "Well, why can't I do that?" Well, they can do that. The reason they shouldn't do that is because of something they haven't experienced yet. So, how do you educate a child on what they shouldn't do if they haven't experienced the consequences? Well, you create an environment or you give them a problem where they experience the consequences. What's that? Constraints-led approach to coaching. You constrain the environment to help them attune to information, specifying information in the environment to help them develop skills and action capabilities to solve the problem. You coach them, you teach them.
Yeah.
And when I'm thinking about your son, um, if if they don't understand the issues with the way that they're behaving, then I personally, again, I don't have a child. I mean,
Yeah. This is
the only thing that I can equate this to is a dog. Like, got a dog, we train, or I train the dog. Mum and dad do. I guess this is actually useful. Mum and dad behave differently with the dog than I do. So the dog behaves differently when I'm with the dog because the dog perceives affordances for others, perceives my affordances, perceives the way it can act with me. It knows if I get the dog food out downstairs, that if it barks, I'm going to step back and I'm not going to do anything. So it
mm,
stops barking so that I move forwards and start putting food in the bowl. And then it barks and then I step back. So that's behaviorism. You're teaching by behavior. No, I'm showing it what happens, it being the dog, I'm showing it what happens when it barks because I don't want it to bark. So I'm just going to step back. Me shouting at it, stop barking. Why should I stop barking? It doesn't understand English, which is obviously the first big barrier. I can't say stop barking, and the dog go, okay. Um, so I need it to perceive affordances, which isn't language. And
this is what I'm doing with Aiden because
because
at the moment,
human language is different.
because at the moment he wants to argue because he's trying to push boundaries. He's trying to test what he can and cannot get away with. And so at first, I argue back because I am a parent and you will do what, because that's what we're taught to do. That's what was done to me, etc., etc. But I, in fact, just went, okay, you want to argue. And I'm not going to argue. I just stopped. I just stopped. He does not like that very much and wants to continue arguing. But I'm just like,
So what would you think that he's learning from that?
that's the question. Because it could be multiple things.
Wait,
And
he
that is,
will be learning multiple things because it's an
yeah.
experience. What
But
information he attunes to is what we're interested in.
so a couple of options is arguing isn't a good thing.
Good and bad is irrespective here. It's whether
Mm,
they get to the goal or not. Is it effective or ineffective at reaching
yeah,
the goal that
so
they want?
basically arguing is ineffective.
Yeah.
Just shouting and arguing and shouting and shouting is ineffective. So it's like, okay, what's the alternative? And I'm starting to see the alternative because he takes himself out of the situation because he is emotionally charged.
We
And
all
he's
get
like,
that way.
yeah, we all do, exactly. And so he takes himself out of the room, goes upstairs, comes down, and then he just talks. And then I'm like, okay. So he's recognizing that talking his view, and we have a discussion. If it gets emotionally charged and there is an argument again, I also go, hey, are you arguing with me?
Is arguments bad?
No. Okay, let me rephrase. Emotionally charged, just shouting.
Okay.
Yeah, so emotionally charged. I will probably use that. No, thank you.
Emotionally charged, but emotionally charged isn't necessarily bad.
Shout. It's the shouting. It's the just yelling.
It's
So
it's the yelling that's uncomfortable for you because I
yeah,
imagine being emotionally charged is fine.
yeah,
Again, this is
yeah.
my interpretation. The emotionally charged is fine because you want people to be passionate,
Oh
and
yeah,
you probably want arguments because you want disagreements to try and solve through the issues.
yeah,
What you don't want is the shouting. So it's the volume at which the information is being shared.
yeah. So that's all I'm looking to. Yeah,
And that he may not attune to. He may not attune as in originally attuned to the issue being the volume, which to me is where the issue with, oh, we shouldn't argue comes in. No, it's
Mm.
not the argument that's the issue. It's the volume at which information is being shared.
Yeah.
Oh, we shouldn't be emotionally charged. Yes, we should be. It's how charged people get and the words they choose to use because of it. If you start using expletives, well, the
Yeah.
expletives don't add any information to the argument. All they're doing is adding insults or
Mm.
potentially perceived insults. It changes the tone of communication. So emotionally charged isn't negative, but
No.
adding insults into the information is negative. So you need to attune to the information differently. And again, this is where online conversation for me is the struggle. It's if you are using loud, attacking comments,
Yeah.
that's ineffective.
Yeah.
Arguments are effective, and emotional or emotionally charged
Passion,
communication,
excitement, all of that
yeah,
stuff is
that's
fine,
still
but it
effective. Yeah, and if you're not familiar with the specifying information that you want individuals to attune to, then you won't be able to constrain the environment for them to develop those skills. So kids will still shout and argue and moan and bitch and whine with sweary words because they don't know that's the information you want them to attune to because you haven't given them the the appropriate constraints to attune to that information.
and often what I say is, please don't shout.
So you know what you want. Maybe you haven't articulated it to them.
I like that. And there is also a time to articulate.
Yeah.
So it's during conversation when, because of course I get heated too, and then I start shouting, which is exactly what I don't want. And because I start shouting, he starts shouting, and then I start shouting, and neither one of us want that. So why was that's
Do you
where I
know he
got to.
wants
Like,
that? Do you know he doesn't want that?
I don't know that he doesn't want that, but I don't want that. But actually, he has said, I don't like people shouting at me. Why does everyone shout at me? And often my reply, calmly, is, I'm not shouting.
Which he probably sees as wrong.
Yeah,
Because if he sees you raise your voice, i.e., his perception, because he's attuning to information in the environment, and his attunement is different from your attunement because we are individuals, he may perceive you as shouting, whereas you don't perceive yourself as shouting. But if you're raising your voice, even if you're not shouting and bellowing, but you're raising your voice, whether that's being deeper because you're older and he
yeah.
could
It's
perceive
the
that as louder,
firmness of voice,
is the tonality at which you're speaking, because that's the specifying information that he's using when he's perceiving affordances. It's the everything that's
which is
happening
why
with the sounds, the
he says that
vibrations,
he's not shouting when he actually is, when he is like very loud.
because we don't perceive a voice. We perceive vibrations. Those vibrations have specifying information in. That's direct perception.
Hmm.
But if you don't understand the direct perception and where it all comes from, then taking an ecological approach to things, you can forget what we're really looking for, which is information. It's fun, this stuff, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I do love it. It's good.
I think it takes a type of expertise and a type of person with a level of expertise to have these conversations clearly and openly, which I
Yeah,
don't think there are many of those people in the world right now because potentially of the experiences that they've had. Like pre-university for me, I was extremely emotionally charged. I either took one of two extremes. I didn't speak at all. I was extremely quiet because I didn't want to say anything wrong. Or I exploded and broke people's noses because I didn't like what they were saying. Like they were the two extremes. I
but
didn't
are
break
you
many
not
people's
still
noses, but
emotionally charged now?
yeah. But I was at the extremes of being emotionally charged. So I wasn't in control of my behavior, but
Mm.
the behaviors that I was eliciting were behaviors that I didn't want to do, but I felt in that moment forced to do because my control, i.e., my expertise of the specifying information at the time was limited. So I was attuning to affordances of a way to get out of the uncomfortable situation. I don't like what this guy is saying. I'm going to punch him in the nose.
Mm. And so
Or
from a because this is a similar experience to what I'm having with Aiden. And so it's the constraint is adding the constraints and coaching him through that.
Because we are always experiencing, we are always in learning environments, but people, for whatever reason, don't think that we are learning. Like you go to school to learn, or I'm teaching you something. No, you don't decide to teach something. You are always teaching something because people learn through experiences, empiricism, which means every interaction you have, you are teaching. Whether you
Mm.
want to or whether you don't, you are teaching. If they have perceived specifying information from an environment that has come from you or is related to you in some way, then they are learning from you. So if you wrote something years ago and they read it, they are still learning from you. So you're still teaching them, but you're not intentionally teaching them that thing because you are one of the multi causes of the information that they are seeing, which could relate to behavior, which is why kids could say, oh, but you did this when you were younger. Why can't I do it now? Because you, past tense you, child you, is teaching future child of yours because time is current future.
That my mum does that so much. Well, you used to do it. I'm like, okay.
But we all go through it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the sort of like smack my head against a wall things with some of these conversations about Generation Alpha and their behavior. I'm like, yeah, but we all misbehave when we're younger because we're trying to work out what we can and can't do, what we should and shouldn't do. That's part of learning. You can't just not learn it.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating. The reason we are seeing things differently now is because things are different now. There is variability. Is it any worse or any better? No,
No, it's just it is what it is.
there is
It's just how you
variability.
see things differently. You have different.
And that's how we can explain literally all of the experiences through the ecological approach. It's not we're better or worse. It's there is variability in learning experiences, which we all accept and know. We just seem to coincidentally forget it when we're comparing stats or comparing behaviors or asking why someone can't do something. Danny's rant of the day.
I love it. It's good.
Okay, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, it's just fascinating. It's just brilliant. It's just is the whole approach. It is genuinely life changing.
But it's challenging to communicate to other people.
Yes. Yes.
Right. I've slowed down on the video because I was troubleshooting the affordances and stuff. So, but yeah, like I say, I'm going to work on the cognitive load theory article. I'll close it out for today then.